Welcome to the Uzima Health and Wellness podcast. What did the doctor say?
So first of all, welcome to Uzima Health and Wellness. And I want to thank you for your time. I know you're very busy. And so I'm very excited to talk with you as there's been a lot of conversation about the social, political determinants of health. And part of that does include environmental issues in every community. And so I was so excited to see on your website, and I'll let you introduce your company, about the word environmental equity. So please, I want to welcome Makara Rumley, Esquire. I'm so proud to say that. Smart Black girl magic. and to have you ultimately talk to us about this conversation of environmental equity. But first, tell me about yourself.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Kendra. I was just very excited to be here. Again, my name is Makara Rumley. I'm the founder and CEO of Hummingbird Firm. We are a community engagement consulting company, and we focus on the environmental industry and the work that we do. I'm an environmental justice attorney by training, so I have always focused on the disproportionate impact of land, air, and water pollution on communities of color, as well as what they call linguistically isolated communities, which simply means where English is not the first language of the folks that live there. And so we use a culturally competent lens in order to make sure that we are really, truly connecting and communicating and translating a lot of complicated, confusing jargon, science, which you know all about, Kendra, to the everyday person. Okay. Because ultimately what they're concerned about is, how is this project going to impact my health and the lives and well-being of my family?
Okay. Esquire, Makara Rumley, thank you and welcome to Uzima Health and Wellness. And I'm just so pleased to be your host as Dr. Outler. And we're talking about environmental equity. And I'm excited to hear your version of what that really means as we try to talk about health disparity on the Uzima Health and Wellness platform. So tell us about yourself. You understand you went to Spelman.
Yes, Dr. K, class of 1998.
Hey.
Sociology major, political science minor. And I had the opportunity to actually take an environmental justice class by Dr. Robert Bullard, who's considered the godfather of environmental justice while he was a professor at Clark Atlanta University at that time.
I'm excited to understand the term, and I was going to wait, but I just can't wait now. What does the term environmental justice mean?
So environmental justice really focuses on the disproportionate impact of land, air, and water pollution on communities of color. And those communities have traditionally not had a seat at the table, the table of decision makers, right? Have not had a voice, have not been communicated with. And environmental justice seeks to include the voices of people who live in communities and are most impacted by environmental projects. Those environmental projects could be a landfill, a trash incinerator, a trash transfer station. It could be lots of facilities that operate every day actually have permits to pollute. Your local dry cleaners has permission to release toxins down the drain, but they have a limit on the amount that they can release. And what it is that folks who live in environmental justice communities usually have multiple sources of polluters, all concentrated in the area where they live. And there are a lot of impacts, not positive, specifically negative impacts that come along with that.
I have had the privilege and honor of interviewing several physicians from Morehouse. It is my privilege to have my first Spelman graduate on my platform. I am a graduate of Agnes Scott College, which is on the other side of town.
Yes,
My
yes.
friends went to Spelman, so I was in the neighborhood. That was my Friday, Saturday, Sunday weekend with my friends that we came from Houston. I went to Agnes Scott and they went to Spelman. I also took a course at Morehouse, and that was 20th century Black male writers. So I know in the Clark Atlanta, the Spelman Morehouse, educational community, that there's some very powerful professors that can change the trajectory of your life. So with that being said, your passion must have been spurned from these classes that you took at Spelman. So please tell us more and indulge us in the world of being a Spelman graduate.
Really, you just spoke perfectly to it, Dr. K, in that I started off Spelman as a math major, engineering minor. I was going to go dual degree. I was going on to Georgia Tech, and I was very clear about what my path was there. And that class, that environmental justice class that I took from Dr. Robert Bullard changed the trajectory of my career and my life. Mm-hmm. And I switched at that point to sociology, minor in political science. Okay. And environmental justice is a multidisciplinary field. So again, there are toxicologists in this field, there are farmers, there are health advocates, there are doctors, there are attorneys like myself, there are scientists, there are engineers. I'm not going to touch on all of them, just naming a few. And so I decided that the tool that I was going to use initially to help achieve environmental justice for the communities that are most impacted, most vulnerable, was the law. Wow. And that's why I decided to go on to attend George Washington University Law School after I left Spelman College, which thoroughly prepared me for that experience, might I add. And just so proud of my alma mater.
You should be.
And so went on there just with my passion solidified and ready to really see what environmental justice looked like in practice.
So you turned your passion into a profession and created a company. What's the name of your company?
The name of my company is Hummingbird. Mm-hmm. And turning that passion into a profession was not an easy thing. When I first started off as an environmental justice attorney, I was given the advice, do not say environmental justice. That's a militant term, that's radical. You'll never get anyone to hire you to do that. You'll never, if you apply for any research or any grants, no one's ever going to fund anything that's tagged as environmental justice. So I was discouraged, along the way, but just could not look in any other direction because it was my passion, Dr. K. Mm-hmm. And so at one point, I was the only coined environmental justice attorney in the state of Georgia. At one point. So I went on to have, loads of experience working in that discipline. Mm-hmm. I guess I became so well known, I was asked to be a political appointee under the Obama administration at the Environmental Protection Agency. And I served as the senior advisor on community engagement to the regional administrator here in Region 4, which covers the Southeast region. That regional administrator at the time was Heather McTeer-Toney, who's also an attorney, who's also a Spelman grad. So we had some Spelman magic going on at the time. And then when the Obama's administration was over, it really didn't matter, who won the election. I was a political appointee, so my position had ended. And there were so many people, Dr. K, that came to me about, how do I reach these communities? How do I talk to them? How do I get them to understand the project? How do I address these concerns about their health and exposures? And that prompted me to found this company because I felt like there was a gap in the field in communication, culturally competent communication between these large projects and everyday people.
Let me ask you I'm going to ask you a sidebar, and that is, number one, How is Spelman doing? If you've kept pulse with COVID in this environment, how's your alma mater doing in the face of the COVID pandemic and making sure that young ladies are still able to get a quality education and then come out and live their dreams like yourself?
Well, Spelman College, along with the multitude of HBCUs, is very resilient, and they switched to that virtual platform when we were, heavy on lockdown for the past 18 months. But I do know that this school year, people are going back in person, face to face, following all the CDC health guidelines, because developing those relationships, I think, during your matriculation at Spelman College and any undergrad, but especially with my experience, really solidified just the network that I have right now. It is invaluable. It's priceless. Those credit card commercials, it really is priceless. So they're being resilient, they're optimistic, they're hopeful for the future. They've received more applications for admissions than they have in the history of the school, which was founded in 1881. So it's pretty competitive to get in there right now.
It is. It's very competitive. My question to you is, please pause, and if you could, for the young ladies who are, if mom is sitting down with her daughter right now and saying, what's the trajectory to being a lawyer? And I always ask my guests to please explain, because sometimes I want to be a lawyer, but we don't know the steps. And take me from where you went to high school, and I understand you're from Maryland, and take us on that trajectory, please.
So I attended Gaithersburg High School. Go Trojans. Okay. In Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is in Montgomery County, Maryland, in the DC metropolitan area, about, I would say, an hour outside of the heart of the District of Columbia. And it was a good childhood in Gaithersburg. Definitely picturesque. We would have the agricultural fair is still in Montgomery County, the county where Gaithersburg is. There's a pig competition, just like Charlotte's Web.
Great.
So, and they still sell tractors right around the corner from my parents' house where I grew up. So good time, lots of support. And I would say at the time, I didn't know that, I wanted to be an attorney all the way in high school. I knew I did like public speaking. I took on a lot of leadership roles, even as a high school student, and was very good at advocating, whether it was for myself or someone else. I was very active in the NAACP youth group in Montgomery County. I was the president while I was in high school, so had an opportunity to go to the capital of Maryland and Annapolis and meet legislators and just really understand how to speak up for issues and how to advocate. So I would say that just my time in Gaithersburg, my time in high school, but also my extracurriculars really put me on that path that made me confident to pursue the path of being an attorney. So once you get into college, got to keep that GPA high. You have to take the Lsat, which is the entrance exam for law school, similar to the MCAT for medical school, and other the GMAT for graduate school. And so the Lsat, I don't know what the exact format is right now, but obviously you want to get as high of a score as you possibly can. And law schools want to see that you maxed out your major in your college, which means whatever your major is, they want to see that you got an A on your final project or presentation or culmination educational material. They want to see that. And then obviously, they're looking for a well-written essay and recommendations. So you want to keep your GPA high. You want to develop strong relationships with your teachers so that they can write you recommendations. You don't want someone writing a recommendation that and they don't know you. One thing that I wish that I had taken more advantage of when I was in undergrad, which I encourage you to, is to go to office hours. Even
Yes.
if you don't have a particular question of
Mhm.
a professor, that gets them to know you better. You get to talk to them about what you want to be, what you when you grow up, what you're thinking about. They could even introduce you to colleagues and people they know within their network. So you can just really get connected. You know, you may rule out some things based on a conversation or an internship or a shadow day, but you won't be able to make those assessments if you don't get exposure to the information and the experience. And you can get that exposure if you're talking to people who are at the professional level, where they're going to be able to introduce you to some people that could be key in your decision making.
And so you got into George Washington University, which is an
Yes.
outstanding school here, and there's no shortage of great law schools in this area. And were you happy with that experience? If you left an HBCU and then you went to a predominantly white school, how was that transition, and were you prepared for it?
Oh, Dr. K, you asking the real questions now.
I forgot to put that on the sheet.
You getting deep on me. No, that's completely fine. It was different.
It is
So
different.
at Spelman, if everybody studied and answered all the questions on the test, everyone could get an A. We
Mhm.
didn't have a curve. We didn't have a bell curve in terms of grading. And so that is a significant shift.
Mhm.
Going to a law school that does grade on a curve, that means everybody can't have an A. There's a certain number that's going to be designated for A's, B's, C's, and below. So that was a shift in approach, right?
Mhm.
And then the other ticky thing is, okay, let's say you have different law schools have different curves. So George Washington has a C curve, where Georgetown has a B curve. So if you go to Georgetown University, it was a higher ranked school at the time than George Washington it was. I'm guessing it's the same. I haven't really checked the rankings lately, but essentially you have the same student, but that student would have a higher GPA if they were at George Washington if they were attending Georgetown versus George Washington. The ultimate point is that's one of the questions that you don't know to ask when you're deciding which school to go to. And again, that's not because you're not going to do well, but you want to know how the grading system is set up. That's an important question that you just don't think about. I also think that if you're thinking about going to law school, it's important to read some books about law school.
Right.
And how to succeed in law school. I know that sounds really, really basic, but law school isn't like undergrad. You're going to read more than you've ever read in your entire life, to the point where I didn't even read a book for pleasure for 10 years until 10 years after I graduated from law school, because I was so just tired of reading. Now I'm in a book club, so no worries, y'all. But yes, and I don't know if you're going to be able to get my dog out of this. And so yes, that's just something you need to take into consideration.
Okay, let me.
Dr. K, can you put it on pause?
Yeah, that will be clipped.
Okay, I'm gonna let me put her in the basement.
Okay, I'll put you on pause.
She wants to be.
Okay, you said something very important, and that's the same thing that I experienced with going to medical school. You have to prepare to go to medical school by reading what it's going to take to get accepted in medical school. You need to study study the differences in the medical schools you're applying to. And medicine can be a little bit more tricky in terms of DO degrees, MD degrees. So sometimes students need to kind of decide what is best for them. Allopathic schools or osteopathic schools, and what their ultimate objective is going to be, what their passion is. And so I really agree with you in terms of reading what does it take to get into law school, and what does it take to get through the law school that you have been chosen, or you have chosen to enter. And so our youth do need to do their homework, because I find that one of the challenges that we're having with young Black students in professional schools is the dropout rate, right? And it's because they're like, I thought this. And then when the reality sets in, of course, we may be the first ones to drop out. And we definitely want to keep producing Black professional students in a higher rate and keep students motivated and encouraged. So thank you for explaining that for our high schoolers that want to be like you when they grow up, and I can't blame them. So let me ask you a quick question, not even a quick question. Please tell us about your work in the world of COVID. You spoke about communication and reaching communities. I suspect some of that may have been affected given this year of COVID and year plus of COVID.
Well, interestingly enough, Dr. K, our business has grown significantly during COVID. All of our engagements prior to had been in-person meetings, public meetings. We would travel, on site to where different projects were, different trainings were, and everything shifted digitally into the virtual world, into Zoom. And then we found out that we had more engagement because everybody was at home. And there weren't barriers for them to attend the in-person meetings, such as childcare, when they got off work. And one thing that we did have to make sure that we addressed was the digital divide. Everybody doesn't have a laptop. Everyone doesn't have a computer. Everyone doesn't have strong Wi-Fi, even if you do have Wi-Fi or a smartphone. Okay. So making sure that we're using all of our tools in our toolbox to connect with people. So, we would have a meeting on Zoom, but we'd stream it Facebook Live and take questions from there so that you didn't have to be on the Zoom platform to participate, okay? And then if you lived in a rural area and your bandwidth just was not strong enough, we made it so that you could call in and we would elevate callers' questions who were on the phone first to make sure that they were included in conversations. For some people, we just have a good old-fashioned conference call. Do you remember when you just used to talk to people and not see them at the same time?
That's true.
Yeah. So we would do that too. And then you have good old-fashioned handy-dandy mail.
Yes.
And postcards.
Still works.
People were sometimes that would be the only time someone would leave their house every day was to check the mail. And so our engagement with people skyrocketed, and we really leaned into certain techniques to make sure that we were reaching vulnerable communities.
So I noticed on your client list, very impressive clients. And some of those clients include cities, just communities, I guess, in cities that may have called on you. And so I'm very interested, for instance, let's just pick one. You had several up there. I'm familiar with Savannah. I'm actually born on the other side of Savannah, a city called Brunswick, Georgia. Savannah.
Okay. Yes.
Fun day. It was fun for us to go there for shopping. You have the islands off the coast of Georgia. It's just such a tropical, southern, but we also have plants. And so part of my grandfather worked at a plant called Hercules, and there's all this smell. So Brunswick has a toxic smell in the area that is nostalgic for us, but lo and behold, and find out it's toxic.
Yes.
So, but then I also saw you have bigger cities like Philadelphia. So please give me an example like Philly. I'm very familiar with Philly now that I live on the East Coast, and I find that community very intriguing as well.
Well, first, Dr. K, let me touch on Savannah, which is close to Brunswick, close to your hometown. We've had a couple of projects in Savannah. So again, it's making sure that those communities, especially that have large Black populations whose ancestors were some of the first slaves brought over here onto the continent, and it still has the highest population of descendants of original African people who were brought over to this continent. So there's a rich history there. My grandmother grew up on St. Helena, which is one of the islands right there off the. So we might be kinfolk and not realize it.
I think we found each other.
And so I've worked on a couple of projects there, just the city looking at some of its, former industrial properties and how to change them with some of the changing landscape of the city, and getting input from the people who live there of what they want to see, which properties they want to be evaluated to be improved, and what are some ideas of what they might want to see there. One thing you might be interested, there's this whole program, it's called Brown Fields to Health Fields, where you take a former toxic site, it could be a gas station, those tanks are removed, any toxic soil that they see is removed and remediated, and they may put a health center on that very property. So those are our two worlds connecting there, Dr. K.
Yes, that's awesome.
But an interesting project that we're working on in Philadelphia has to do with the decommissioning of the Philadelphia refinery, which is located in South Philly, and has been in operation since they extracted oil from whales, and has operated in an all Black community, majority Black community there. And there has not been the level of community engagement that the residents would like. But enter 2021, and we've been engaged by the engineering firm that's responsible for decommissioning that site. Decommission sounds fancy, but really it's removing all of the infrastructure, like the pipes and the wells and the systems that you see above ground and below ground, to make the space ready for redevelopment. And so our company is in charge of communicating with the people who live in and around that facility. And so it's exciting because it's such a historic site. It's exciting because there has not been a concerted community engagement effort in the past. And it's something that the people who live there have been asking for a really, really long time. And so our firm is honored that we get to step in and be part of improving communications in and around that particular facility.
Let me ask you something. And the question is, while they are interested in reorganizing that community, does that make you nervous that the ultimate goal is to change the landscape of the community such that it becomes gentrified, it becomes less culturally sensitive, and that people start to shift? And we've seen a lot of population shifts in DC when we start thinking about words of, oh, we're going to improve, we're going to reorganize, restructure, call in a company, and then you find yourself almost aiding a community out of their space as opposed to helping them enjoy it. What do you think?
So our role is making sure that the community has a voice where in the past they wouldn't. No one would ask them what they thought, what they wanted to see the community turn into. No one would take their ideas into consideration. And those who own the land, who are building the development, would just do what it is that they want to do. Communities that are gentrifying are layered in that you have what we call legacy residents who've lived there for decades, which are they're usually Black. And then you have newer residents who are coming in who may have been there, 5 years or less, and they're not Black. They are not the same demographic of the people who have lived there for a long time and requested specific environmental changes, and those requests have not been met. So what happens when you finally get to the point where you have a community meeting, Dr. K, the folks who are most vocal are the people who just moved there, versus the people who have lived there for decades. And because there is a cultural disconnect. Usually if you're looking at an older, more senior generation of Black people, they didn't grow up in a landscape where they even feel comfortable talking in front of white people. Right? So they're in the room and they're listening. But they may not be saying anything out loud. Well, there's also a technique that we use called progressive stacking to make sure that the newer resident isn't asking 10 questions in a row, where the person who's lived in the community for decades only gets to ask one. So you really pay attention when all the group is together, when it's, one big public meeting, Dr. K, you really pay attention to those dynamics to make sure that everyone's included in the discussion.
Yes.
One of our approaches is to, sometimes we can't get away from having the big meeting because that's what our client wants.
Yes.
But we always encourage having smaller meetings with different groups. And so we'll have a meeting just with the legacy residents. So we can hear what it is that they really think. And you have to have lots of different ways to gather information. If you create a safe space and you create an environment where people think that or believe or know or trust that the comments and the perspectives that they are offering are going to be taken into consideration, and then they see their feedback in the results, we see that as a win.
Yes.
We see that as a community co-developing changes and improvements. And we only work with clients who that is their aim.
That's their goal. Okay. That is awesome. I would, as a physician, love to do one of your field visits. We, in public health, the first part of any type of community change has to be a community assessment. So, you have to go in and survey. Sometimes that is with focus groups. So it sounds like focus grouping is very big. And yes, during the time of COVID, you can do that digitally. So I think that, I would love as a physician to tag along. I think that this is one area where our worlds truly merge because as we talk about health disparity, we have to explore the environments from which our patients come from. And we also have to explore their changing environments that our patients come from. The displacement, the ability for fresh fruits and vegetables, the ability to go outside and not be exposed to pollutants. So I would love to go on a field trip. You want to take me on a field trip, please?
Of course. But it's very, very key, Dr. Outler, and that is that when you go into these communities, it's not just the exposure to pollution, it's lack of access to healthy food, it's transportation, it's healthcare, it's there's no bank in their neighborhood to deposit a check. So it's all of these exposures, right, to use a medical term. It's all these exposures that this community is really subjected to that work in combination to really decrease the quality of life that they can have. It's never just the one thing.
That's right. So I know that you wrote a book. I'm pretty sure that you will continue to write books and educate us. And I know that you also have a YouTube platform where you are constantly talking about your passion. So I want to end with you. Tell us about your book and tell us about your entire platform to enlighten us so that we can understand the words environmental justice better.
Sure, Dr. Outlet. Thank you for asking about my book. So this is my book, Modern Strategies for Community Engagement, How to Effectively Build Bridges Between People and the Bottom Line. And you can find this on Amazon. Y'all know how to get to Amazon. I don't need to tell you how to get there. So you can either look up the title or look it up by my name, Makara, Makara Rumley, Rumley, and you will find it. And we just really talk about what all the different ways are, what all the different methodologies and approaches are to community engagement, not what's been done in the past, not the same old. We have a meeting, we put it in a government building, we schedule it for 6 o'clock, nobody shows up, and then the opinion is, oh, the community doesn't care about this.
Right.
No, you put it in a government building where some people may not feel comfortable going into a government building for a variety of reasons, Dr. K. Then you pick the time when the majority of this neighborhood is at work. Maybe they work the third shift. You didn't even take into consideration when most of the people are at work. You also didn't take into consideration that it was Wednesday. Maybe people are at Bible study. Maybe there's a large church in the community that people congregate at on Wednesdays. Or maybe you had it on Friday at 6 o'clock and you didn't realize that everybody roots for the local football team of the neighborhood high school and everybody's at the game.
That's right.
So the old approach is to schedule a time and a place and expect for the community to come to you.
Yes, right.
But the more modern approach is to really respect that every community is different. I say that every community is like a snowflake. No two are created the same. None are one size fits all. Who looks good in one size fits all anything? I know I don't. So you really have to take the time to learn who your audience is, learn how they interact, learn how they connect so that you can go to where they are to tell them about the project that's really important to you, but you haven't made it important to them yet.
Yes.
And so that's really that's high level. I get into way more detail and I talk about lots of different components of what I just mentioned on my YouTube channel, which you can find us at Hummingbird on YouTube. And again, very passionate about what we do. I enjoy it. And our goal is to make a positive impact in the communities that we work in.
I think it's outstanding work. I think it's meaningful work. And I hope that any young Black aspiring lawyer sees this and understands that there's more work to be done, and that they can apply to a lot of schools, even Agnes Scott College, but even I'm partial to
Of
Spelman.
course, of course.
But so there's so much in common, and I really would like my field trip. And so you and I'll talk about that when we get off this platform, and continue to check back in with each other to see how your work is changing communities. There's another conversation I'd like to do about food insecurity. And there's some connections that I'd like to make with you on that conversation and how important that is as we lay out and look at communities of color. So thank you so much, Esquire. How do you say lawyer? Esquire Rumley? Was that what we say?
I don't even know, really.
I know you got that ESQ behind your name.
I know. I worked hard for that one, so
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
never letting it go.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day, and keep up the fight.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting this platform for all of us to tell our stories.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Hi, Uzima family. If you like what you're seeing and what you're hearing, subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon below to be notified of our recent videos. What the doctor say?